Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Mirek Steiner. I'm
Hold on one moment, Mary. Wait for the pop-up asking if you want to accept being presenter.
sorry. So can you see my screen now?
Yes, it just showed up. So please feel free to start.
Okay, that's good. So my name is Mirek Steiner. I'm a program manager in SQL Server working on the Azure SQL V12. I'm in the security team, and with me today we have our representatives from the development team. We have Swagat, Siom, and Yurong, and they will help me to answer your questions. So feel free to write questions as I will be talking and presenting, and we will be going through the presentation and make some stops to answer questions. So today's topic is the Azure Active Directory Authentication. And the full topic should be Azure Active Directory Authentication for Azure SQL Database V12 version. What we will cover is the general value proposition for this feature, followed by the main architecture and the configuration steps that I needed to set up this type of configuration. And a major part of this presentation is the demo, because the demo will combine different components. There is a Azure Active Directory part and the SQL part itself. And at the end, we were talking about some other feature considerations, possible limitations. In the appendix, there's plenty of material that I will not cover because of the lack of time. So with this, let me get started. So in the past, Microsoft introduced this central place of identity called Azure Active Directory Identification. And this is the place where we can centrally manage identities for different services. And SQL Server is one of these services. So the idea was really to go in this direction, because this is a future development direction, and integrate with Azure Active Directory so far that we can use this central identity management repository. So the benefits are obvious from this project. The first one is this is the alternative to the regular SQL authentication. The other, which is very important, it stops the proliferation of user identities across database servers, because we do everything from Active Directory. There's also one important thing that Active Directory offers, and this is the password expiration, which happens on a regular basis, and the users are required to rotate their passwords. The other part that is very interesting with this feature is so-called support for the federated accounts, where the federated domain can be federated with the local domain, or the company domain can be federated with the Azure Active Directory, and through this we can support Windows authentication. And this allows us, for example, to access Azure SQL DB V12 without entering the password, because the password will be checked in the ADFS that already represent the on-prem federation. There's also one important element of the management, and this is introducing the groups. For the on-prem customers, it's kind of existing today. For Azure SQL DB V12, we will be able with Azure Active Directory to introduce the notion of groups, which means we can create users that are representative of groups, and under these groups we have users in Active Directory that can be easily added or removed. So this is really a manageability, ease of use. There are also other issues related to, for example, compliance. Many compliance are enforcing the central identity management. For example, if you think about HIPAA or the European Union regulations, where the large companies will follow these regulations, allow to central the identities from one place for all services. So bottom line is SQL Azure version DB12 can support this. So let me talk about these authentication methods. How can we authenticate through the Active Directory, through the Azure Active Directory? And the first method is so-called user password. And this is for the Azure Active Directory, so-called managed domains or managed accounts. These are the directories that people can create ad hoc quickly and put their own small domain, adding users, subtracting users, adding groups. And the truth is that this is the easiest way to proceed. The other one that I already mentioned is the integrated Windows authentication. And this is an option where the domain that the client is working on the domain joint machine, that this domain is federated with Azure Active Directory. Then we can use the Windows credential, and we don't need to sign in with the password, because the federation itself and through the synchronization with the ADFS, Active Directory, Azure Active Directory understands this. The password will be automatically checked by the Active Directory, by the federation itself, by the ADFS. And the third one that we have available, or it's rather in the preparation, is the token-based authentication. And this is the mechanism that allows to authenticate with Active Directory and with SQL using a token. So accessing the token. This method is usually highly visible in case we use the services. So all the tasks that we are running without human interaction, that are running in the background, there's no nightly jobs, and they can communicate through the token. So let's go to the Azure authentication architecture. And on the slides that you can see, we have several components. So let me start first with the Azure cloud itself. So we have Azure Active Directory here. And on the other side, we have here Azure SQL Database. So this is the database V12 that is part of the Azure. In a separate box, you see on this on-premise Active Directories that are using ADFS. And now if this part is federated with Azure Active Directory, then we can use Windows authentication. And many companies do this to make sure that their main domain is really driven from one place, from Active Directory. Now you can see this small two boxes in the middle, and this is the client part, which is the ADO.NET 4.6, and there's a library that we have added called ADSL SQL Active Directory Access Library for SQL Server. This library is placed here to talk either to Azure Active Directory or to talk to ADFS. Now ADO.NET is kind of the main driver and linked this library. And on the left side lower part, you see the application, and we have different tools. We have programming that we supported here. So usually the connection typically starts from the client, goes through the ADO.NET, and then goes to Azure SQL Database. Now, Azure SQL Database knows that we would like to use the Active Directory. We have introduced an authentication keyword, extended the authentication keyword called Active Directory password, and Active Directory integrated. So based on the keyword, typically what the database does, it moves goes back to ADO.NET and asks to access the Azure Active Directory. And this is with the data that was given originally to SQL. And that goes to Azure Active Directory to being authenticated. Now, interestingly enough, if we use user password, the password is not sent to SQL. So the method is smart enough to realize that SQL cannot authenticate, so it simply pushes the communication back to ADO.NET and everything goes to Active Directory, where in case of the user and password, this is the place where Active Directory will authenticate the user, send the token back to ADL SQL, and it goes through the ADO.NET back to SQL. It recognizes there, and this way the user and password customer is authenticated. Now, if we use Active Directory, if we use the ADFS, there's additional round trip that has to be taken, since the Active Directory doesn't have the password. So realizing that the Active Directory, that the authentication is integrated, Active Directory sends this authentication to the ADFS and receives from ADFS the confirmation about the user, just authenticate this user, goes back to Active Directory, and then it goes back to SQL. So there's a little bit complicated round trip, but it's pretty solid, and it encapsulates these two methods. Either this is the user and password, or this is the on-premise when we use the federated domain. So let me continue to the next slide, which is an important requirement from Active Directory. So in order to gain a trust between applications, that means that, or between services, a trust as a trusted service between Active Directory and SQL Server, we need to align, or we need to make sure that the subscription that we use for that the given subscription that we use is aligned with the Active Directory, with the tenant. There's a mechanism how to do it, and we simply need to check on this. If people create so-called a default Active Directory, so let's say you got a subscription, and with this subscription you enter for the first time the portal, this default Active Directory would be created for you, and you don't need to associate anything, because by default this is the subscription that points to this specific Active Directory. Now, if you want to create your new Active Directories, then this is the mechanism that you have to do. You have to associate the subscription with this directory on one side, and on the other side make sure that this subscription is also, that this subscription hosts the SQL Server on the other side. So we will go through this example, because if you don't do it, if you don't check this step, the initial provisioning of AD Auth will fail. So before we jump to demo, let me give you a couple of key setting authentication steps that are needed to make sure that Azure AD authentication works with SQL DB12. So the first one is the setup, and in the setup, on one side, obviously, we need to do the alignment of the subscription that I mentioned that we check, and then we provision so-called SQL Server Administrator. This is the Azure AD Administrator. And what we did for version V12, we introduced the second administrator here. So regularly we have a SQL administrator, and this is a new administrator that can be called a super administrator that allows to administer users and groups that are associated with the Active Directory, with the Azure Active Directory. A regular administrator that you created when you create SQL Server on Azure cannot do it. Only this AD admin is empowered to create such users. And not only, and then obviously give permissions to other users to create users. And this particular provisioning happens either through the portal, through the Ibiza portal, or through PowerShell, or you can use REST API. And I will show it in the demo how to do it. The second important piece of the authentication is to create a user in the user database. So we need to go to the SQL DB V12 server, create the database there, and then create this Active Directory, Azure Active Directory user or a group. And again, that can be done either using a tool, or you can write a program for this. And the third part is called usage. It's just simply trying to, or connecting the specific user that was created to the database using on the client side ADO.NET with tools that are supported, or with the C# programs, with the Visual Studio 2015. By the way, on the tools support, there's a requirement what needs to be downloaded to support the client side. And on the high level, it is in the presentation in the appendix, but on the high level, you need to first download the .NET 4.6, and there's the whole logistics. If you download Visual Studio 2015, you don't need to do it. If you want to use programs, you need to have Visual Studio 2015, and there are also tools that are part of the preview release for SQL 2016. So these tools need to be in place. Otherwise, you cannot access the Azure. You cannot use Azure AD authentication. So with this, we are ready to go to demo. But before we do the demo, I'd like to know if there are any questions, any issues that people have with this, clarification, so we can make a little break right now and spend some time on this.
Hi, Mirek. No questions have come in yet.
No questions so far. Okay. So I will be continuing with the demo, and let me just walk you through what are we going to do, because it may be a little complicated, and I mean, once you do it, you understand, but the issue is there are different components. So the first part in the demo, what we will do is we will go to the Azure Active Directory portal, and I will show you how to check this subscription alignment with the Active Directory. We will look at the administrator group that we can use to administer SQL, and we will also create a group to provision a user in the database. So this is the part that will be done in the Active Directory. Once we are done with this, we go to the Microsoft portal, to Ibiza, to provision Azure Active Directory admin for a given SQL Server version 2012. This provisioning is kind of GUI driven, and I will show you a couple of screens there as we go through the demo. The next step is to connect to SQL Server database using the administrator and making sure that this connection works. And for this, we will use the SSMS version that is part of the SQL Server 2016 preview release. And then next step is to create a user in the user database, connect with this user to the database. And then we can do a couple of small things like removing the user from the group, adding the user to the group in Active Directory, and see how this affects the connectivity. So this is in the high level, the demo. And let me now go and start. So I have here my portal for the Active Directory. And as you can see, there are different Active Directories listed here. One of them that I will take is the AAD Authentication Preview Active Directory. But before I go to this, I like to show you something. If you click on this subscription here, you will see for this subscriptions, what is the current or what is the default Active Directory. And you will see that the AAD Authentication Preview contains two subscriptions, 1.0c and 3.cb, and these are the sponsorship subscriptions. So this subscriptions has been aligned with this particular Active Directory. Now I can change it. I can go to make sure that this subscription corresponds to another Active Directories and then apply it. We don't want to do it because there are some consequences in terms of the resource changes. So if I need to make changes of the alignment, how to set the current subscription with the Active Directory, I need to go to setting. And in the setting, what you can see is these two subscriptions that I show you, 1.c, 1.0 and 3.c, and they both right now point to the Active Directory Authentication Preview, to this Active Directory where I want them to be. Now, if you want to change it, you have a way to do it. You click on this subscription, you go to Edit Directory, and this is where you see that you can load other directories as well. It still tells me loading, so I don't know how long does it take. It loads other Active Directories. Now, one important thing here is the following. You can only do it if you are a subscription administrator. If you are a co-admin, then you cannot do this. So there's an issue possibly with the co-admins. You see here, for example, we got another suggestion, and if I would continue, it will associate this particular subscription with this Active Directory. Now we don't want to do it, but that's the option to do it. So on one side you associate with the subscription with the Active Directory. On the other side, you make sure from the Ibiza later on that I will show on that this subscription is also hosting a SQL Server. So let's go back to to our original Active Directory. So I click on it, and for those who are familiar, we have the users here and the groups here. If you are unfamiliar with Active Directory, in the official documentation for this feature, there's tons of material you can read. By the way, this feature was released yesterday as a public preview. So all these materials is not under NDA anymore. You have all documents that you see here are available. We have a security blog that is talking about it. So this information is simply there. Go and read it. Here in this Active Directory, I created 3 users, and there's a main user that is me that was created with my subscription. But there's also a native user, John B, that was created for this so-called managed domain, aad@preview.onmicrosoft.com, and there is another user, Alice, that is an imported user from another Active Directory. You see that Alice's domain is different, cqclinic.onmicrosoft.com. So we have 3 users here. Now let's revisit the groups that we have. And this is the key point for setting up the admin. So our suggestion to use the groups for the admin is probably the best practice that you can do, which means that you allow an admin to be a group. And in this case, I have an admin called DBA, and this admin has two members, Alice and myself. There's another group that is a group that can be used like users. So if you click on this group, you see that this group is empty. But we still create this group as a user and then later on add or remove the users from there. So this is this beauty of management through the Active Directory, that with a single push you can add users, you can remove, and they get certain permissions at the database. So I think it's that's it for now. If talking about the side of the Active Directory, let's go to the second part, which is let's go to Ibiza. So, and let me open this. Let me make it a little wider that everybody can see it. Can you see it, guys? Good. I'm just checking with my team if they can see it. And as you can see, I'm in the portal. The portal was updated recently, so it can accommodate right now the provisioning for the Azure AD administrator. Now, the important thing before you start is look here. I'm in the portal as me, and if I click on it, I see different directories here. And the important thing is to make sure that I get my default directory in place. And this is the AAD authentication preview. So if you don't see it as on the top, you have to click on it, because this is this is your Active Directory that has the subscription corresponding to this, and then SQL that is under the subscription. So let's go to the servers that I created. And as you can see, I have 3 servers here, and one of the server AAD authentication tests is under the subscription that you may remember, 1.0c. So if I click on this server, if I choose this server, I get the server setting, and you can see here a new panel for those who really are familiar with Ibiza under the setting. And this new panel is called Active Directory Admin. It is in the preview, so if you just choose this, you have to accept the preview terms. But this Active Directory Admin allows me to choose the administrator. So let's set an admin. If I set an admin, another blade is coming, and you can see that this blade shows exactly what we have in our Active Directory AAD Auth preview. All the users and all the groups. So you recognize Alice, you recognize John B, there's a DBA group, and there's a test team group. So and this is the picker or the chooser that you can choose from to associate the Active Directory administrator. So if we select, for example, individual, John Brown, it is here, and then I have to save it. And it takes some time to save it. And once it's done, the John Brown would be the administrator. So let me go back to the Azure part, and let me get John Brown here. It's still saving. Did I just push? No, I did. I've forgotten to say save. This is a pretty quick operation. But you have to remember that you need to push this little button save, and then you see it. If you don't do it, then it just keeps waiting. So we have right now individual that was set as an administrator. So let's go to SQL, to SSMS, and we connect from SSMS to my database, to my server that is AD authentication tests. This is my test server that you've seen in the Ibiza. Now, if I choose John B, and I check that he wants to connect to the master DB, then you can see that John connected with his credential to master DB. So how do we see it in the metadata? Well, when I go and click on this and go to the master, and I open the query, remember I'm still administrator, so I can access master. And I run a select statement from sys database principles, and I scroll a little bit down, you can see that John B was added to the principles. So he is right now a principal and he's external. Now, let's do the following. Let's go back, because we said it's not the best practice to use individuals as the administrators. You can, but you don't have to, or we even suggest not to do it. So if we go to now again to the picker, to the selector, and right now I want to really select the DBA, the group. So I select it, it's selected, and I say save. Okay, and you can see that the DBA right now is the group DBA is the Active Directory admin. So let's go back to our SSMS here, and let's run this query again. And as you can see, not a big surprise, John B cannot access the server because he is not a principal anymore. So who can access the server? Well, let's go back to the Azure Active Directory, and we made this group an Active Directory admin. So we can see Alice here. So let's go back and see if I can connect to the server using Alice. And make sure that Alice connects to default. And boom, you can see that Alice is now part of the server. Okay, she's connected to the server to master. So let me repeat this, the same thing, and let's see quickly what is in the master. What do we see here? Just to save time, I can copy this. And we're right now in the windows where Alice is the DBA. And here you see that we see as a principal is the DBA. This is the DBA group. So Alice doesn't explicitly shows up here. She's just part of the group. The group has the option to be an administrator, and everybody who is part of the group, and by the way, it is indicated as external group. So with this, let's, I have a demo. I created a demo database. Let's go to this demo database. This is a user database. And let's create a user that we had already here in this group. And the user was test team. So we create user test team from external provider. So that's the syntax that we use. If you want to create a user that is related to Azure AD, you use from external provider. And if we click on it, you can see that this user was created. I can borrow the select star from sys database principles and run it here. And you will see that the test team was created in this database. So the critical notion and issue is that we have so-called contained users. And contained users means that there are users that are created for a specific database. If you connect to another database, this user is not there, and you will receive a connection error. So let's now go and see if we can connect to this database as John B. Let's get him here. But now we have to be careful. We have to check here that this database is demo. It cannot be master. Okay, because and you can see let me quickly see where did I create the user. I have a little glitch here. Okay, I don't think that I was in the user when I created this. I don't think that I was in the user demo. You see? Let me just double check this. And you can see here that she is connected now to demo. So let's see if we can repeat the steps. Or we were. Okay, the group already exists. Fine. So let's. Oh, here's a problem. Here's a problem. Let's go back to the Active Directory and let's see who is in this group. And it's nobody. So that's why John cannot connect. So you see that if you are not part of this group, you cannot connect. So there are a couple of checks that you need to make. A check on the database that the group was created there, and a check on the AD side that John is there. So let's add John to this group. So as you can see, John was added to this group right now. And if we try to connect again, he's now part of the test team. So if we try to connect again as him to this database, let's change it, yeah, as demo, then you can see that, boom, he can connect. And you see it here that that he's connected to the demo. Now let me repeat the step to show you the error. So when I go back and remove John from this Active Directory, I remove him, which means that the test team group is empty. Let me just make sure that we do this. You can see that the test team group is empty right now. If I connect again as him, John, let me check that he's in demo. You see, that's the generic error that you will get. 18456 is not part of the group. You may get these errors in different places, and this is the time where you're supposed to check, do different kind of checking Active Directory on one side, checking the database on one side. There's in the PowerShell at the end, there's a little bit of troubleshoot guide that helps you to just go and see what needs to be done. Remember that we simply have right now two major components. We have Active Directory and we have SQL Server, and we need to check both sides. Now let me show you one more thing that unfortunately I have to use another server for this, and this is the, I'm trying to get into the server that is integrated with our Microsoft domain. So I have another server, MSIT, integrated, and I connect there as a Active Directory integrated authentication as me with my credentials. This is possible when the domain is federated with the Azure Active Directory. So if I click on it, it just takes a little longer because this server is in Japan, but you can see that it's going right now. And this is something that you probably from the on-prem that you can recognize. I authenticate to SQL Azure version V12 with my Windows credential as Redmond Miregas. So this is what I like to show for the demo. I have further slides, but maybe at this time I'll stop and ask if there are questions.
Hey, Merrick, no questions at this time.
Wow, guys, do you understand everything? That's great. So that means either it's very easy or you just got lost. But well, I try to show you really something that can be done pretty quickly, because you can create your own managed domain in Active Directory. You just follow the steps and you go to the SQL, you create the admin, you create the user. So pretty much within, let's say, if you work with the default, within 15-20 minutes, you have a system running. So let me go back to the slides just to recap on this. Couple of limitations that we have. As I said, this version is in the public preview right now, and we really would like to encourage all of you to test it. To just go, test it, use it, let us know. The team is eager to hear from you. We have a telemetry, so we can troubleshoot issues, and it will help both sides. You can go ahead with what you have, and we can also do some better work on our end. But we have some limitations, and the first one is, as I mentioned many times, you can only do it for database V12, Azure SQL V12. So for example, for customers who are on the version V11, they cannot do it. They have to migrate to version V12. And this is very important that the customers will not be mistaken and try, let's say, to create an admin for such a server. So that's the first check, and obviously you know that there's a check, select add version, that tells you what version this is. The second one is the following. Well, in this current version that we have, we do not support Microsoft accounts. And under Microsoft accounts are the accounts like Outlook.com, Hotmail.com, Live.com, or associated accounts with Microsoft. We can associate them, for example, gmail.com. Unfortunately, right now, these accounts are not supported. So you can neither create a admin for them, nor you can later authenticate. The good news is that in the Ibiza, they are gray out. You probably notice it, that my name was gray out, which means you see them in the display, but you cannot choose them. You cannot pick them. And the other limitations that we have is currently we don't support multi-factor authentication or any other of authentications that requires the interaction, because we are supporting so-called the non-interactive protocol. So these two areas are not supported in the preview. Based on the customer feedback, we will see if this is kind of an excellent candidate for GA or not. So that's really, it's up to you guys. How many feedback do we get from you, and what is the specifics about this account? So this is something we would like to hear from you if possible. And the other things, just to still get a few minutes for the discussion, hopefully we'll have one, is that some considerations that we have, like, for example, we can create only one administrator at any given time, the Azure Active Administrator. So it means at any given time, we may have one regular SQL Server administrator, and one is the Azure Active Directory administrator. Or we don't have Azure Active Directory administrator. You don't need it. There's a possibility to remove the admin from this, but then there are consequences because the users who are there cannot access this. Now the admin, the Azure Active Directory admin is the guy who does the bootstrap. So as you have seen, he's in a master, and he can give the permissions. He can create the users, create groups, but he can also give permissions to others to do this. The next step is to create the users in the database and to connect. There's one thing we like to suggest as a probably best practice. Typically, if you look, for example, at the SSMS window, we have a connection timeout set to 15 seconds. We like to increase it, suggest to increase it to 30 seconds. You've seen that sometimes this communication between different components may take a little longer. So just make sure that it goes to the 30 seconds area. Another that I already talked about it, but I like to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Right now, we only support .NET Framework driver 4.6. So all other client drivers right now are not supported. We are working on them to support this, and the goal is to support everything by each of them by the GA time when we will be ready to GA. Tools like SSMS, SSDT are supported. There's a little caveat because SSDT is right now partially supported. We are working on the better version. But what you need to do is you have to use the preview version from the SQL Server 2016. There are pointers in the presentation where to get them, because these tools, they show these two authentication keywords, the password and the integrated. If you use the previous tool like 2014, you will not see it there. And couple of other small things related to the driver problem. For example, SQL cmd.exe. We don't support it yet because it's ODPC driver, and we are working on supporting some tools like BI or Excel to make sure that that they work with us. This is kind of the slightly outside of our team, making sure that the other teams can integrate it. So this is all planned for now for the private preview, for the public preview. With this, I like to stop and ask you for any questions. We have a team here waiting for questions, so please go ahead.
Hi, Merrick. We do have one question that has come in. Michael Langdon asks, is this available across all V12 pricing users? I'm sorry, pricing tiers.
And the answer is yes. So you can create, Michael, you can go ahead and create the smallest one, and then you can create a P11, and it's supported everywhere. So the answer is yes. Any other questions, issues? Okay, we are coming closer to the end of this presentation. Guys, really, please go ahead and test this. This is a cool thing. And many customers, especially large customers, want to use it. We went through the private preview. We've got different set of customers. Some of them did the federation, test the federation. Some of them test the manage. It's an excellent.
You just need to unlock your phone first.
Sorry, my phone. It's an excellent way to really give a try to test, get familiar with this. From our standpoint, this is the future because you know, in the Azure cloud, we will be favoring this one central identification place, and this is Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. So it's good to spend some time on it, and we are here. We are on Yammer. We are in the blog. We have the security blog. The pointer is down. Let me just quickly go through this that you can see at least our documents. So there's a main documentation here available that describes over several pages what we get. So this is this one. And then we have our own security blog. If you can see this face, probably you recognize the famous writer Rick Bam, who wrote this very good document. Go ahead and do it. And we have our own security blog as well. And on this blog, we are announcing this feature, and we go and help with different issues, PowerShell, blobs, blob on PowerShell. We also have the examples of programs. So please use this material, work on it, and give us some feature. And with this, on behalf of the team that was waiting here for questions, hopefully you will have more for us as we go. I'd like to thank you, all of you. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we will hear from you soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Merrick and team, for presenting for us today, and thank you to everyone who joined us. The recording will be posted to YouTube, and we will upload it to the meeting archive as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and goodbye. Have a great day or great evening whenever you are. Bye.